God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public comment. Do we have public comment, or are you just here for the reports? Okay. Then we'll move on. Approval of the consent agenda. Have you had a chance to read the minutes?
I did? Yes. I so move to approve the consent agenda. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item is the audit report. Eric Wolf.
Eric is on the...
Oh, he's on the tube. Okay. Eric, you're on.
All right, well, thanks for having us on this evening to go through the results of the 2022 financial statement audit. I'm Eric Volk, a partner of the Spokane Whitley office. And with me, I have Dave Lyons, senior manager who ran the audit, and he'll be going over the results.
Okay, David.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for the introduction, Eric. I have with me Dane Toff, who was instrumental in helping getting the audit work finished. Without him, it wouldn't have been done. So Dane's here to interject any color commentary or just plain correct me if I get something wrong. So some of you know me. I know Don Liddycoat. I know we've met. Charlie. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David Imus. I'm a CPA here with Whitley. Eric and I are both Oregon CPAs. And together we do the annual audit and report every year to this body about the results, which is what we're doing right now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show some prepared content that we have for you, which will be for those of you who have been around for a while. It's very, very similar information that we have for prior years, but it's important. There's a lot of important information for the board to know and stay apprised of. So first of all, we'll take you through a summary of the required communications, which is a summary of the required communications letter that we give to you at the end of the audit, which goes through a list of communications that as auditors we're required to tender to you at the end of every audit. We'll hit the high points and kind of go over those in summary. And then we will take you through a financial analysis where we have a couple pages of slides with just the condensed financial information. Again, a lot more brevity than what's in the full financial statements and the notes there too. And then finally, or almost finally, we put together some benchmarking and ratio analysis that we'll take you through. Like, not a part of the audit, but it's by the time we get to the end of the audit, we can kind of give you some insights as to where the hospital is at. And then finally, we have an accounting standards update where we'll take you through at least one of the authoritative standards that the GASB has that we think is going to have a lot of impact on hospitals going forward, and Lake District in particular. So starting out with the required communications as promised, again, just taking you through a summary level of what's contained in the full formal signed required communications letter. It's important to discuss our responsibility under what we call GAS, which is the standards that govern our profession. We're engaged to give an opinion over the financial statements, but it's important to note that doesn't relieve management or the board of their responsibilities. And as you'll see later on, we have a slide where we talk about those responsibilities of management are kind of codified in that representation letter that we ask management to give us. I think it's up to, it's in the 40s, 45 maybe representations to us about the financial statements. And just so the board can exercise oversight, those representations that management gives to us, those are attached to the back of that letter. So you can take a look and see, it should go back, you can see what management is representing to us. Our procedures are designed to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance. That's an important thing to note, that absolute assurance is just not something that the profession allows us to give. So instead we give reasonable assurance, which involves giving an opinion over the financial statements based on doing analytics and examining certain transactions on a test basis, making inquiries of management, that sort of thing. So just to kind of skip forward, our opinion that we are giving on the financial statements, or that we did give, dated March 30th, was an unqualified opinion, or an unmodified opinion, which is the highest possible opinion that the profession allows us to give. And then finally on this slide, we talk about internal controls a lot in our profession. Our responsibility is to assess internal controls for the purposes of designing our audit procedures and kind of formulating our risk-based audit approach, but we weren't engaged to give an opinion over internal controls, so that's not something you'll find from us. That said, if our procedures uncover deficiencies that we consider merit the attention of this board, then we communicate those in the financial statements themselves in the schedule of findings and collection costs. Or I think in this case, I think we call it a schedule of findings and responses. That's where you would find those. So, like I mentioned on the previous slide, the scope of the audit report is a full scope financial statement audit under governmental auditing standards. And we issued an unmodified opinion, again, clean opinion, or the highest possible opinion. Those of you who have been around for more than 5, 6, 7 years, used to be called an unqualified opinion, all mean the same thing. And then we talk about required communications. That's this discussion we're having now, as well as what's contained in that required communications letter. Significant accounting policies are contained in Note 1 to the financial statements. So as soon as you get past kind of the basic financial statements, the component unit financial statements, you arrive at Note 1, where you would find management's consideration of how they consider significant accounts or transaction classes. The only change you will find to the accounting policies from the prior year that we noted during our audit that was significant was how management considers accounting over leases and lease accounting. There were changes that were required to be adopted during fiscal 2022 by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board in order to conform with statement number 87. So that created kind of a fairly significant shift in how we think about leases. And so you'll see a lot of disclosure in Note 1 and elsewhere in the financial statements about how management considers leases compared to prior periods. Significant accounting estimates are present in almost every set of financial statements with every organization, but particularly in healthcare and really particularly with Lake District. There are some sensitive estimates that we communicate. We consider the allowances for contractual adjustments, third-party settlements, and then also the CARES Act funding and the revenue recognition process that goes into that calculation to be a significant estimate. So those are significant estimates are important to us auditors because they're transactions where we can't necessarily tie them out to a specific invoice or payment stream. So we have to evaluate key factors and assumptions to determine that if management's estimates are reasonable in the circumstances in relation to the financial statements as a whole. I already kind of mentioned the management representations where at the end of the audit, management tenders us several representations where they formally take responsibility for their part of the financial statements. And a copy of that goes out with the required communications letter. Other than that, miscellaneous communications, we didn't encounter any significant difficulties or disagreements with management about the application of US GAAP, and we don't have any opinions, we don't have any evidence of management opinion shopping with lease stance with other accountants. So that kind of concludes the required communications, the first bullet point that you saw there on the table of contents. Now I'll kind of just take you through, again, just a very, very brief walk through of the financial statements. So we'll start out with the balance sheet, or as it's called in our world, the statement of net position. So here we're just looking at the assets and deferred outflows here. So this is just one half of the balance sheet, if you will. We'll look at liabilities here on the next slide. But you can see a big drop off in cash. At first glance could be worrisome, but really we're seeing that across the board with our client base where really beginning with 2020 and continuing through 2021 and 2022, as those injections of cash came in from the CARES Act, the Provider Relief Fund, came into the bank accounts and they're finally being spent, falling off the balance sheet. You're seeing cash come back to a more regular level, if you will. And you can see other receivables, an increase there, pretty normal considering the cost report activity during the year is where those receivables flow through. So now shifting over to looking at the liabilities and equity, or liabilities net position, if you will. You can see current portions of debt decreased. That was because of the implementation of the new standard that we talked about, and the net position decreased, as we will look at on the income statement, which is right here. So done with the balance sheet, now we're looking at the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, also called kind of in the vernacular the income statement. There's a drop off of net patient service revenue of about $1 million, which represented about a 3% change. Professional fees and purchase services were probably the biggest change in operating expenses, and then operating losses. The overall operating loss, or loss from operations, if you will, stayed pretty static despite that change year over year. So these are the financial statement amounts just in the raw numbers, just in the black and white. We put together a visual representation of those numbers and put them against some benchmarks. One comes from the Almanac of Hospital Financial and Operating Indicators, and then the industry benchmark comes from the Flex Monitoring Team report from hospitals with net revenue under 90 million. So you'll see those here represented in different colors. Lake District Hospital will always be in that blue bar, and then the two benchmarks that we use to kind of analogize to peer groups are in the yellow or gold bars and green. So as you can see, operating margin, each of the last 3 years was below water, had a negative operating margin. That's the profitability measure that we use to assess whether or not the hospital is covering operating expenses with operating revenue. The next slide is a very, very similar margin, only it has total margin considers non-operating revenue and expenses in addition to just operating revenue and expenses. So as you can see here, there was kind of a high water mark there in 2020. Again, a lot of that non-operating revenue is coming in the form of grant funding, and you can see then there in 2022 a little bit of an improvement from 2021. Days cash on hand. This illustrates visually a little bit of the concept that I introduced when we were talking about the statement of net position of the balance sheet with that change in cash. You can see almost like a stair step, like a ladder going down toward 2022, which to the untrained eye or uneducated eye might look kind of alarming. But again, we have to remember with in 2020, at the end of 2020, especially at the end of fiscal 2020, many district hospitals, especially those with June year ends, were really flush with cash that they hadn't spent yet from the provider relief fund. So this is just kind of a logical representation of that, where that cash is being spent down. That said, 51 days cash on hand, I think with just looking at our client base, that's definitely probably a room for improvement to beef that number up, especially. Days revenue and accounts receivable. This is a metric that we actually like to see lower, not higher, because clearly we want to be turning over revenue and taking all those payments that are sitting in receivables and converting them to cash and getting that receivable number lower. So you can see pretty comparable to the prior year, a little bit of a spike over 2020, and definitely over the industry averages. So I think in talking to the professionals here at Withley who do billing and do patient collections and that sort of thing, and revenue cycle management, I think their gold standard is somewhere around 45 days. Average payment period, the final ratio that I have to take you through, this is one that just measures how effective basically the accounts payable are being turned over in the vendor payments. So you can see pretty static, right around 55, 60 days for each of the last 3 years. And this is a measure that it's very important to kind of keep an eye on, because obviously we don't like our clients to have to waste resources on late fees and that sort of thing. But at the same time, it's all about your vendor base, and are your vendors kind of screaming at you for payments and that sort of thing. And if not, probably not a lot to worry about here. If they are, then it's something you probably want to attend to. And then finally, I'll take you through an accounting standards update. And this is definitely kind of my wheelhouse. It's something that that I practice in, which is keeping up to date with the authoritative standards and what the standard setting bodies are doing, and even sometimes helping the authoritative bodies and the standard setting bodies understand the needs of my clients when they go out to public comment for new standards, new authoritative standards for accounting. So that said, I could spend the whole rest of the meeting time talking about what the GASB has been up to for the last year, how their changes are going to affect you. But I whittled it down to just one standard that I want to talk about, because I think a lot of the other things that they're up to really won't have a lot of applicability to community hospitals in the space I work in, rural health and critical access hospitals. I just don't think that this body would really benefit a whole lot from taking you through a reference rate reform or that sort of thing. But all that to say that there is one standard that will have applicability and attachment to almost every critical access hospital that I work with, if not all, and it's GASB number 96, which has to do with subscription-based information technology arrangements, which sounds super complicated, and it's not uncomplicated, but it's essentially just GASB 87 lease accounting for licensing agreements. So what the GASB did is said if you are committed to future payment streams for licensing agreements for software that you do not own, there's going to have to be some balance sheet impact that will look and feel a lot like how a lease is accounted for today. So there will be a present value calculation of those future payments, and then on the books there will be a liability for those future payments, and then offsetting that there will be a capital like, not quite a capital asset, but a capital like asset that will be amortized similar to how capital assets are depreciated now. So it even says right in the authoritative standards that a lot of these principles were borrowed right from the lease standard. So if we can help your finance team understand lease accounting, we can definitely help them understand subscription-based information technology arrangements. So I think it'll have a lot of impact, because every hospital I work with has some licensing agreements. They're paying for EHRs, EMRs, you name it, they'll all fit into this. But there's probably a lot fewer of those arrangements, a lot fewer of those agreements than there are perhaps leases. So probably a little less heavy lifting, but still some education to do and understanding. So for this body, just want you to know that it's out there, and it's going to be something that we're going to have to attend to in fiscal 2023, but absolutely not outside of our wheelhouse, definitely within our capabilities and management's capabilities of attending to this, but just for you to be aware of. So that is all the content I prepared. Again, much thanks to you for having us and carving out time in your busy meeting agenda to have us present. It's our pleasure to serve as your auditors and other service providers for other accounting and consulting needs. So we really appreciate the relationship, and I think I noticed on the agenda there was some closed session coming up, so I think our intent was we would drop off, but we can certainly stick around for questions if there are any.
I have one question, David. In the footnotes, there was 2 areas that you listed as areas of concern, and I was wondering if you might expand on those a little bit and why they're concerned.
Yeah, I think, and just to kind of paraphrase you, I think not necessarily concerned, but I think we're looking at significant accounting estimates and how they're more sensitive disclosures than others. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it had to do with not footing general ledger accounts and...
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, so we have 2 in the schedule of findings and question costs. Again, just kind of coming back to our responsibility for reporting on internal controls. So we're not giving an opinion over internal controls, but if we see something that we feel raises the level of a significant deficiency or a material weakness, we're duty bound to report that to this body, which we did in the schedule of findings and question costs. So not so much in the notes, but in the schedule of findings and responses there. So yeah, I can definitely speak to those. Actually, let me pull them up real quick on my computer. I'll quit sharing the presentation here. Where I I tell my clients this all the time, that we are we use Microsoft Teams a lot here at Whiffley. We don't use Zoom, so I'm not quite as versed in it as I am in Teams. So anytime we're communicating two internal control findings. One is probably the most common finding that Whiffley and every other accounting firm on the planet issues, which has to do with compiling the financial statements and how that process comes together. So at the end of the audit, we're engaged by management to prepare the financial statements on their behalf, because most community hospitals, most of our clients here at Whiffley consider that to be a duplication of efforts. You know, we already have all the information, we have the footnote templates. So it's absolutely, I think we even say in the finding, it's not an unusual circumstance, but whenever we do that, professional standards require us to communicate in the schedule of findings and responses or in the required communications letter, one of those two places, that we're doing that, and so that it could potentially lead to a breakdown in internal controls, because theoretically management has more information internally over the financial information of the hospital than we do. So it is something that it's formal communication, and we do absolutely make that. I hate to use the word kind of boilerplate, but that's kind of what it is almost any time the auditors are engaged to prepare the financial statements, which is what Whiffley does for probably 98 to 99% of our clients. We have this type of finding that we discuss. So the response to that is management just basically makes a business decision, you know, are we going to continue do the costs outweigh the benefits? And usually the answer is yes, because again, they consider it a duplication of efforts for them to be preparing the same set of financials that we just, you know, went through soup to nuts, so to speak. The other finding that you mentioned, I'm sorry, I didn't get the name of the board member asked the question, has to do with adjusting journal entries. So anytime as auditors we propose materially large adjusting entries in order to get the financial statements in conformity with US GAAP and to conform with GAAP principles, again, it kind of begs the question of, is there an internal controls issue there that we need to communicate to the board? So almost any time that there's material journal entries, which there were in this case, we communicate that to the board so that you have knowledge of you know, the degree to which the financial records which were handed over to us as auditors in order to perform our audit of management's financial statements were camera ready or not. So, so that's kind of the basis of that finding on a high level.
Okay, because there wasn't some fairly large year-end adjusting entries, mostly in two areas: intercompany settle up and unearned revenue. So I assume that's what you were saying, is those possibly weren't footed and they weren't reconciled at year-end?
That's correct. Yeah, I believe we're also kind of duty bound in our required communications. We kind of went over them in a summary level during this meeting, but we do give a sheet with all those adjusting entries. So yeah, anytime those journal entries that we propose as auditors that are necessary for financial statements to conform with US GAAP, anytime those exceed a certain dollar threshold that is considered material, it's going to trigger this type of finding. Again, to keep the board apprised of the degree with which the financial records that were turned over to us to perform our audit were camera ready or not. So, you know, to put it a different way, our opinion says that it's a clean opinion because the financial statements at the end of the day conform to US GAAP principles. All the record, they're materially correct within that framework that we note in our opinion. But it took some entries and a little bit of nudging from the audit firm to get us there. So that's kind of how you can read that finding.
All right, thank you.
So this year, we were kind of pushing on some loan covenants, so the timing of the audit was pretty slow. Is there anything we can do to speed up the process so that we get an audit report, which is technically due December 31st?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent goal. I think that was Don Liddycoat that asked that,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken. Okay, hi Don. I think that's a great goal. I think we definitely support you in that goal. I know going in the Wayback Machine to calendar year 2022, I know we scheduled time and with our staff in their schedules to do the audit in the fall because of, I can't remember what the exact circumstances were, but long story short, that time had to be rescheduled. And so I think that's kind of, you know, the main root cause of why, you know, why we're sitting here talking in early April and not early January, having issued, you know, toward the end of December. So to the extent that that can be avoided and that and then this goes for all my clients, I'm definitely not picking on Lake District, but the extent to which the fiscal year end 6/30 books could be closed out earlier, and the records could be made available to us, you know, in the fall, so that we can do our work. That's, you know, that would probably be the biggest thing.
Okay, thank you.
You're certainly welcome.
Any other questions? Everybody got all that? Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this stuff with you guys. I guarantee you, when I get home, my wife doesn't like to hear about this, so I appreciate the outlet for my nerdiness.
Okay, thank you very much.
Take care and have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. A lot there to digest. We're going for our own internal financial report now.
Okay.
So Ed, you're up.
I apologize if I have to re-enunciate something. I'm still getting my dental work fixed, so. Yeah, it's right there. The February 2023, down a couple. One more down. From the beginning, I guess. It's different when we see it. It's not bigger. Good slideshow.
You'll have trouble with Tina. Try. There you go. Start with the slideshow.
There we go. So first, for patient count, 293, a decrease of 35 over the previous year. Clinics had 1947, which is an increase of 68 over the previous year. Other outpatient services, 4346, a decrease of 565. Overall for the month, we had 6,586 visits, a decrease of 532 over the previous year, based mostly on laboratory COVID surge. Next slide. Gross patient charges for February was 3.9 million, a decrease of 28,000 over the previous year. But you can throw a blanket over those last 3 years there for February, because the short month and it's, of course, need to get after it. Next slide. That one looked better on our screen, didn't it, when we tested this? But revenue deductions for February was 1.4 million, 25% contractual, 1% charity care, 1% admin write-off. And that's just the higher contractual adjustment is due to a higher Medicare, Medicaid population for that month. So that the contractual obligation adjustment is actually larger.
So it says 27% for the average for the year.
Yes.
That month came in at 37, this month came in at 37%.
I can get Medicare and Medicaid to pay us what we charge across the board, then we would be there. But some of these things are being addressed. I was thinking of collections, biggest one there, kind of flat. It went down 2%. But the good news is March was like 3.4 million. So we picked ourselves up. We're starting to solve problems permanently that are holding us back. So.
Those March collections, you think they're 3.4?
Yes, 3.4 million. The biggest thing too, if you look at the AR, the overall AR, I know it's always a sticking point, it's just like we heard there, is we've reduced our AR by 1.4 million month over month for February and March, essentially.
And that reduction is actual cash collected?
Yes.
And not write-offs?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm 100% sure of it. Days cash on hand is 29. Why did that drop from 55 to 29? Is as we would go through our whole audit process and we always fine tuning things in the way we do it, and so the cash didn't really go anywhere. It's just restricted. We have more tighter restrictor on it. That's all. But definitely something we're working towards on a daily basis. So, next slide. Monthly net income for the month was a net deficit of $1 million. You see that 1.171. So basically, it's a revenue of 3.9 million, less revenue deductions of 1.4, which was the killer, and less expenses of 3.6, which have been pretty flat for the most part all year. Less 222K in non-operating revenue and expense. That's basically consisted of that 174,000 HRSA expense on the grant line. That definitely affected it.
So going forward in March, what do the revenue deductions look like?
I can tell you right now, they're flat at 1 million.
Instead of 1.4?
Yeah. This is profit and loss for the year. So year-to-date revenue was 25.2, less operating expenses of 27.3, and then the non-operating revenue of 672 results in a deficit of $1 million. Next one. Monthly expense is down 2% year over year. So making an improvement, but we can always do better. There's definitely efficiencies to be made. Next slide. And then just on the balance sheet, as you can see in the unrestricted cash, the investments, the restricted cash, you see them flip-flop around. It just has to be that way. We have to be more correct, but the actual reduction in cash is about $500,000 for the month. Even though we're showing $1 million loss, it's only about 500 in cash going out the door.
So restricted cash is becomes available soon?
We're working on it. It's definitely something we work with Fleet on. Is how do we perform all the steps necessary to recognize it? Because truth be told, we weren't set up for grants at this level, and we're just we're taking new steps now to be ahead of the game. So. Well, that's all I had for the balance sheet and the Lake Health District report.
Any questions? Okay.
Well,
So,
before you go to that, we have a couple other things.
capital purchase.
We do. So we have a slide up. So one of the things that the board asked that as we were working on our budget to get approved last year, if you recall, we had about $3 million in capital requests. And the board said anything over $200,000 we want to review. Do you recall, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things that I asked Quint to work on with all of our managers is we have 3 months left before of this fiscal year. What do we absolutely need to buy? And you heard, I think in January or February, Quentin come in, and several of the managers came and talked about what capital needs they have. And all speak very, very strongly about their needs. It's hard to whittle down that $3 million. So what we have here is, for the next 3 months, several items that we feel fairly strongly that we need to do.
Are you saying they add up to 385,000?
Correct. Now, we'll start off the first portion, the acute beds. It's hard to believe that we can spend for 10 beds $144,000. These really are special beds. But they are designed to work with our monitoring systems. They're really important for us to have. And we didn't buy all new beds when we moved into the new hospital. We bought some. We need to get 10 new beds for them to work and provide the kind of information to the nursing staff that provides information to the physicians as they're caring for the patient. We've been able to get that price down by about $20,000, so that's as aggressive of a price as we can get. The second item are long-term care beds. Over the course of, I guess, since we were a critical access hospital, a lot of times what we would do is we would buy beds for the acute care, take the cost-based payment, and then after several years, we would buy new and take the older beds and give them to long-term care. It was a good strategy for using the cost-based reimbursement process. Unfortunately, the beds that we have in long-term care, they're on their last leg, and our maintenance crew can't maintain them properly. We need to get 12 more beds. Now, we tried to get the exact number. It's about $70,000. That over the years we have accumulated restrictive dollars specifically for long-term care. We used a fair amount of that money when we built the new Lake Gardens. And it's restricted dollars. If someone dies in our facility and the family wants to make a donation, sometimes they'll make a donation and say, we'd really like to buy you new armchairs or some specific item. Sometimes they'll say, we don't know exactly what we'd like to get you, so you decide. And they're board designated restricted funds. So we haven't spent those funds. So we believe we have about $70,000 in long-term care restricted dollars that we could use toward that, the purchase of beds. So it's, we're double checking the number. We're pretty confident it's 70,000, but so that would not come out of our pure cash, it would come out of restricted fund. Next item, EMS Zoll defibrillators. I can't speak to them. You may recall you authorized the purchase of 2 Zoll defibrillators because we found that when we acquired the EMS service, there were defibrillators, but we didn't realize, actually nobody knew, that they weren't, no longer were serviceable, is that it?
Correct, at the end of 2023.
at the end of 2023. So these are monitors that when EMS goes out and pick up somebody, they are able to provide information to the clinicians in the emergency room. We don't have them, that's a mess.
How many do we have now?
We have 2 Zolls and 2 Phillips remaining.
So when the company shipped them, they sent 4. And we bought 2. So now the choice is, do we take advantage of their mistake? We've gotten a pretty darn good price for those. Or do we send them back and hope that nobody, right now I think the crew is taking them from one ambulance, and if they take it on the one that they're using. If they're short of one, they take it from another vehicle, is that correct?
No, we're still using, the 2 Zolls are here in Lakeview. The 3rd Out ambulance in Lakeview has the Phillips, and the Adel ambulance has a Phillips, both of which are extremely hard to get defibrillator pads for, and they've been back ordered for probably 6 months. And they'll sunset at the end of the year and not be supported by Phillips anymore.
So if we buy these 2, then we would have all 4.
All 4 rigs would be
supported.
with the same monitors, as well as the Zolls that we purchased interface with the AEDs that we have throughout the district, as well as the monitors in the ER and acute.
How much of a discount were they willing to do?
We got a significant discount. 10 to 15% is a lot. I can't tell you exactly, but I can assure you that both Tyson and Quentin have worked hard to get the best deal they could. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that cost right there is about $30,000 less than what we paid for the other 2. Because the box got opened here, so due to FDA rules, they would have to be shipped back to their facility, completely gone through, recertified.
Well, it's a good thing you opened those boxes.
Yeah, I was trying to get a buy one, get one, but they didn't cover that. And I should add that they're also, at the end of April, they start their new fiscal year and the price goes up another 10%.
So we have an opportunity. This was not on the principal list that we worked on a year ago, but things change.
Sure.
And so we have to adapt to that. The next are clinic chairs. When we had a survey last summer, they found that even though we have a new facility, some of our chairs have cracks in them or breaks that don't allow us to clean properly.
Are you talking about like chairs in the waiting room, or?
They're chairs that could be in the exam room. The waiting room isn't the biggest issue. The cleanliness concern is more in the exam rooms. Okay? And while each individual chair doesn't meet the capital requirements, the capital requirements $5,000 or greater. But when you buy them as a group, then it does. The next item is for our MRI unit. We use a wrist coil that focuses the magnetic resonance imaging. It's about $30,000, a little over $30,000. It is estimated by Kyle that based on our needs, we should be able to pay for this within 6 months, maybe 8 months, but in a relatively short time period. They're using knee coils instead of wrist coils right now, but one coil packages, they're not cheap. We don't want to drop them. The last item is, as when Stephen was here at the board meeting back in January, I think it was January, February, he reminded us that he has a request for $350,000 of servers, and these are important to keep all of us secure. Outside hackers, that kind of thing. So our servers have exceeded, well, not quite exceeded, but they met their useful life, and getting the 3 servers, the support and all that is $48,000. Total of $385,000. Now you've just seen that our cash is not great, and yet I think it's prudent for us to plan to make these purchases. Some of the items, like the IT servers, they may be out 6 months before we can actually get them. So there is lead time.
Well, some of these we could run leases too and stuff. Also.
We can. There are things, we're not just talking about, because leasing and purchasing are viewed by GAAP as very similar. It's still a capital purchase. So
One uses way more cash than the other.
it's true, that's true. But as you heard our auditor say, we would need to report that.
But it's how the cash flow is reported.
Absolutely.
Whether it's lease or purchase, it's how the cash flows.
Correct. It's my recommendation that you authorize us to make these purchases. Now, that doesn't mean that we have a whole lot of other really important things to do, but after analyzing what could we absolutely do in the next 3 months, this is what we've come up with. As an example of really important things, we have to make changes to our pharmacy in the air handling within the pharmacy, but we can't get that done in the next 3 months. And that's going to cost us money, just because the engineers getting the work done we don't have a cost yet. Okay? And there's lots of other items that are very important. But these are the ones I'm recommending.
Discussions?
Well, I think a lot of these, I think this is the paradigm list makes sense. I don't know if we work, the chair seems kind of high, maybe it's $853 a chair. I don't know what kind of chairs these are, but.
I can assure you that it's not uncommon for us to have, if you just went into, for example, our rehab waiting room, some of those chairs are $1,000. And we didn't buy fancy chairs. They're expensive. They're designed to handle people that are, as our community and the rest of the country, are larger people. We cannot have someone, we can't have a chair break on
You
something.
can't use Costco folded chairs.
They do work great, but they don't work great on a day in and day out basis.
It's the cushions that cost.
There's liability there that we have to address.
Okay. So we have a suggestion to authorize the $385,161.09 as purchases for capital improvements.
I would so move that we authorize the capital items presented in the amount of $385,161.09.
Second.
Okay. Discussions? It's been moved and seconded to approve the capital items as listed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes. Got it.
This will be the last one until June 30th, right?
Well, I'll tell you, when Tara came to us and said, our stove can't survive, it can't be fixed anymore. And that was what, Tara, $20,000?
It was about 23.
So,
The sensors.
was it something that we anticipated? She did. We didn't. I didn't. So, but that doesn't, I mean, we still have to have them. So unless something is, we're not aware of happens, that's our plan.
And we're in the budgeting process going forward for next year, so, yeah. Some of these items, like the IT servers and things, should be on a rolling basis.
They are.
capital budget.
Yeah.
We are working on that, kind of almost like a Gantt chart, essentially that it's always coming up. We're
Sure.
A perfect example of that is, it turns out Microsoft is not going to be supporting Windows 10 in the end of 2025 or 24. So all of our computers that are not capable of running Windows 11 have to be replaced. And so we're in the process of doing that bit by bit. They don't reach the level of a capital item because you could buy a computer for less than that. But we have to replace 400, 500 computers.
It's not the computer cost, it's the software and everything that goes into it. that costs.
Yeah, very true.
Mhm.
Okay, now for the exciting part.
Next item is the burn grant.
So, let me rephrase or refresh everyone's thinking about burn. Heidi's here, we can talk, she can add if there has more information. So the burn stands for Behavioral Health Resource Network. And when Ed talked about making it clear that they're restricted funds, we received $1,223,000 and change. I forget the exact number. We haven't received all of it, but well over half of it. And the purpose of this, we received two large grants. The other grant was $1,480,000 for housing. Both of these were designated by the legislature, and the burn grant actually comes from Measure 110, which is part of the pot dollars, or marijuana tax dollars. We asked for, in our initial application, for in excess of $5 million to provide the services as we were requested, and we were granted the 1.2 million. And that was based not on our application, but based on the state they had a way of determining based on population and by some other criteria, but that was the determination. We submitted a revision to our grant application because we had a certain amount of money set aside for different purposes, a lot of it for personnel, a lot of it for supplies or services. And we submitted that budget revision in November, December, and we had hoped that the state would review that. They finally reviewed this in March at their meeting. And it's significant that they did that because in our application, we said that in our revised application, we said that of the $1.2 million, our obligation is to provide support for people that are suffering from substance use disorder. We need to provide them a safe and sober environment. We need to provide them job training skills and to support them in their recovery. That's the obligation. That's spelled out in the grant. Because we are receiving a great deal of money from the state through GOBI for a Medicaid population, we indicated that to the state that we're already paid, our staff is already being paid by those state dollars. So we would like to adjust our budget to allow us to use more of that $1.2 million for capital purchase and fixing up a building, because we've got to find a building to do that. We were on the docket for every meeting, and they had them every 2 weeks, and they kept delaying it. We finally made the presentation, and our budget adjustment was approved. So we are allowed of that $1.2 million to spend roughly $850,000 toward acquiring and making good or better a facility to do what we are planning to do. So we have about 850,000. It's between 835 and 845,000. Okay, so that's the monies that we have available to us. So Heidi and I and others have gone through trying to identify every building that is something that we could use in Lakeview. And there aren't a lot of buildings, as all of you that live here know. So we have looked, we cannot, first off, we can't build something. The restrictions are, But you can buy something, you can rent something, you can modify it, but you can't build something. So lots of communities are trying to figure out how do they adapt some office building or some building for whatever purposes. We looked at, and you can, these are the ones that we did look at. We looked at the Methodist Church as a possibility. We looked at lumbermans. We looked at the building that is, not sure what it's called, but it's modified by Dave Newton down by Lakeview, Ottawa. We looked at the Four Square Church. We looked at the Hereford building. We looked at the recently vacated Dr. Davis's office. We looked at the building that Thornton's Pharmacy, back when people remembered as Thornton's Pharmacy. And we looked at the building where Bender's is in right now. All of the buildings are fraught with challenges. Some, it's better to push them over and build a new one than it is worth doing. And we can't build. Some of the buildings, if you spent a lot of money, people weren't willing to sell it. They were willing to rent it. So originally when we put in our application to the state, we thought we were going to buy lumbermans. Not that we need a whole lot of storage place, but it had a pretty big building. Had been in, if you remember when it was open. The owner was very interested in renting to us, but would not sell it. Wasn't interested. Same thing holds true for what was the Four Square Church. So the bottom line, it appears to me that the most reasonable is the Hereford building. Now this is a building that everyone knows is, it's a really big building, much bigger than we need, but, and it's got inherent problems. I think just about all of them, except the Newton building, require a roof replacement, amongst other things. So, in talking with the owners of all the buildings, I have come to a proposed deal to purchase the Hereford building, and it is within our price. The price would be $240,000. We acquired an assessment of the value of the building, and it was valued at $200,000. So the other $40,000 would be for the personal effects and items that are in the building. Our goal is not to rehab the entire building. That would be way more than the money we have. Our goal is to acquire the building, fix the roof, and then work only on the ground floor, because that's where we would put the burn services. Now what we would also do is we would bring all of the mental health services that are now located in 3 buildings throughout Lakeview and try to get almost all of them into one. We're not sure that we'll be able to do all of them. One of the reasons that we have mental health services in the Marius building is because that's where we have our adolescent and youth program. One of the reasons why we want to separate them from adults is frankly, that's where a lot of, they're in care because of their relationship with adults. So it's good to separate them from them. But it is not best practice to have substance use disorder separated from mental health. Often people have both conditions at the same time. And so well, we had to separate them because we didn't have enough space. But in each of the buildings, with this we would be able to do, we think we'll be able to do that. That would help save our costs in the other buildings that we rent. So I'm recommending that we go ahead with that. What the state will require is, if you do agree with that purchase, actually with any purchase, that the state would become a partner with us and require that we would continue providing this service for the next 20 years. So were we to acquire the building, fix up a portion of it, and then someone else would come along and say, I'd like to buy the building, we would still have to continue providing that service, just do it in a different location. So it gives us some option.
You mentioned on the other 3 locations, vacating those, and there'd be a cost saving. Well, how much is that cost savings by moving out of the other locations?
The biggest cost is in the Marius building. And,
So they keep the kids there.
well, we may move the kids over to the building that is across the street from Gigi's office, which is where we have substance
Yeah,
use
the old
disorder.
big
So
first
we
aid.
would get out of the Marius building. We're also in the process of working on a grant to relocate public health into another building. So that would also move out of the Marius building. So that would save us a significant amount of money.
And long-term on this burn grant, are there other burn grants contemplated in the future?
So, while the state won't commit, it is absolutely, of the 3 parts that Governor Kotek has identified, a significant part is behavioral health. And the reason we were delayed from December until March is that the state is busy trying to figure out how much is this going to continue, because they're anticipating, and it's not approved by the legislature yet, they're anticipating that the same dollar amount will be coming every year to each of the counties. But it's not finished until the legislature sets those dollar amounts. But it's anticipated it will be at or maybe above. We don't know.
Do we have a estimate on how much it would take to renovate, refurbish, and other needs of the building before we can move in?
Well, in terms of replacing the roof, we don't have an estimate, and I can't get a contractor to give us a cost. We have had, there have been 2 significant reports prepared in the recent couple of years. One was done by SCOED, and they had some engineering estimates of how it could be done. But I don't have a cost estimate. On the ground floor, we certainly would be looking at some heating issues. I mean, there is heating, there is plumbing, but we would anticipate putting in, as an example, a kitchen, so we could re-educate people that have had substance use disorder. In some cases, people have destroyed their lives and need to recreate and learn new skills. So putting in a commercial kitchen would be part of it. We have some estimates on that, but we have not had a way to get full estimates. It's too hard to get a full analysis yet. But every building that we look at, we would have similar kinds of challenges. And we just don't have the bandwidth to get contractors to estimate costs on every building. I mean, it's hard to find a contractor to do the work.
Yeah, typically when this is my concern that's been expressed to you. We've got $850,000 to do something with. 240 of it goes, that leaves 610. We don't know what all the expenses, costs, dollar-wise, number of types of expenses, and the dollars related to it. The roof itself would be probably eat up most of that 600.
Really?
I've had a contractor do an estimate, and it was right in the $600 range. And that was my first thing I was looking at, because I've got ancient history of doing roofing, but not on the dollar thing. That thing been leaking for probably 30, maybe 40 years, which deteriorates the wood strength of the roof and all that. So we don't know how much it would take. It's not just a case of stripping off the tar and putting new tar on. We need some estimate. Get one of our local engineers or something just to, if we got mildew up there for 30 years, that wooden structure is weakened. When I came on as county commissioner back in '07, I took over the mental health. I did a tour of the building. I was somewhat aghast on the condition of the roof, and I moved mental health out of that to what was the first interstate. Because the last thing, one of the key factors that influenced that decision, it was a diagonal support beam at 4 by 12 that was splintered by no other means than excess weight. And I had a contractor tell me at the time that was the wisest decision possible to get out of that building. We just don't have a cost estimate for that. Well, I asked about it, and I got around 400 or 600. I mean, it could vary. A 3-story building is expensive. And then, even on the SCOID report, it talks about extensive structure and system works. That'd be plumbing, electrical, etc. We have an appraiser. We don't have an inspection. Those two things usually go hand in hand before you buy something. We need something to have an estimate of how much work going to have to go into that to get it up to code. What I don't want, all the things we went over to purchase and where our budget is, we don't have that extra money to kick hundreds of thousands of dollars for things we didn't anticipate that possibly the county buildings or the state code or the fire marshal may require. We need to know at least a generalized subject of what all needs to be done and some estimated cost, and we don't have it.
One of the things to keep in
I don't
mind.
have it.
Pardon me?
I said, I don't have it.
I understand. One of the things that we have to understand about these grants is there's a time limit if you don't spend the money. So if we don't, we have to give the money back.
Right.
Okay, so you looked at Thornton's. Is it for sale?
It is not for sale.
It's not for sale.
No. That doesn't mean we didn't look at it. It's hard to find a building that is workable for this.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but Erie's next to that is for sale, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
There's a sign up in it.
I'm wondering if we could combine.
First off, I'm not against the Hereford building. I'm just not ready to say yes until we get some estimate of what it's going to cost us. And can we get that relatively soon? And how would we cover those over our extending years?
Charlie, I would just say that that Brownfield report covered a lot of the things that Ken has concerns about. The mold, the mildew, 86 pages of that, which was done in October. And having worked on a building that's actually 3 years older than that across the street, old doesn't necessarily mean bad. And I think that there's an opportunity for us here to come in and do something that's gonna benefit Lake District, but also the community in general. I just see so much more potential with this building in the next 15 or 20 years with maybe housing on the upper story, those type of things. And that's addressed in this survey as well. What it would take, is it structurally sound to do that? All those things are addressed. There is an engineer's report in here for that. I would also say that if you look on Main Street, people coming through town, when we get the Alger marquee up, and that's not going to be long, and if we can enhance the Hereford building, then that first impression, and you only get one first impression when you have somebody coming into your community. So I think that there are other benefits that we can't really put a price on that are involved with the Hereford building.
Thank you.
And I do not agree with that, but
You don't agree?
need some estimate on some of the cost to get that thing up. You have to start with the roof, that's critical. We have, I mean, just to re-roof it is one thing, but to inspect the structure and integrity of that top floor that's been waterlogged for 30 years.
Didn't that report go through that, though?
Yes, that would.
Yes.
They
The
did.
report covers that.
Did it put a
Yeah.
dollar on it?
They didn't put dollars
No,
because
not
they weren't in
dollars.
for that. They were just saying structurally how sound it was and what you could expect to have to do.
In fact, they were impressed with.
Yes, and how.
Because of the old growth timber that was used in it
Yeah,
was so, in such good shape. And I've heard from other people, when Weyerhaeuser was in Bly, to a friend of ours, they sold a bridge that Weyerhaeuser put in, and they put it in their house, and they're big, huge timbers like this, old growth. There is nothing wrong with that thing, and they were in the weather, out and everything for decades, and it's beautiful wood. It's amazing.
The old growth wood is the
Yeah,
best you
it's
get
amazing.
if it's better for it.
I don't want anyone to think that I'm recommending that we buy the building with the expectation that we're going to fix the second and third. My expectation is that we would buy the building, fix the roof, so we don't have that kind of problem, and just focus on the ground floor and make that work. If I expect there will be additional monies coming from the state. And I think that we will be able to use, there will be other opportunities. I agree, there are certainly some unknowns that we don't have. We don't have the cost estimates. But no matter what building we select, I think the most important thing we have to decide is, number one, will it function for our needs today? And number two, in 3 years from now, will it be a good, valuable purchase? And if we were to pick some of the other buildings, I'm not sure that's always, they're the best options. Yes, it is, I'd love to have the Thorntons in the other building, but is there enough space for them?
Yeah, I know.
And
And there's some problems with the, what is it, the brick that they use in a lot of those buildings. It's not a good, it's a hard fix.
some of the buildings, you effectively have to push them over because it would be cheaper. So that's why I'm recommending this. And I understand it is risky.
Who ultimately owns this building?
It would be owned by the health district, and the state would not necessarily be on the title, but their needs of having this service would mean that they would be identified. But it's owned by the health district.
So you can sell this building in 10 years and recoup all your money and it's state money?
Well, I'm not sure,
Well, it's a 20-year, I guess it's a 20-year deal.
as long as we provide, continue providing the service.
For 20 years.
That's correct.
After that, it's yours.
Okay, and there's also the brownfield documents, there's cash available for helping clean up. Let's say, with grants.
That would be great.
We can come with don't have to be exact details, but some cost estimate for electrical roof. Is seismic required? We don't know.
Well, I think
Is it plumbing?
I think in the brownfield study, they did do some seismic.
Yes.
Engineering was done.
Yeah.
In that study, and it's a pretty robust study, what it did is identified issues. It didn't come up with estimates. Right now, the challenge is finding contractors that are willing to come in and give us estimates of what it would cost. That's a problem that we are facing. We, on our public health building that we're working on, one of the contractors, we asked them to give us an estimate. The cost was 3 times the purchase price of the building to do internal repairs. What that told me is they just simply didn't want to do the job. It wasn't that it was going to cost that much, they didn't have the staff.
So if we purchase the airport and we can't get a contractor to renovate it or refurbish it, where are we? Where would we be?
We would still have the money. We would report to the state that we haven't been able to find a contractor, and that we would ask for approval for an extension. So the important part that people in Salem do understand is that there's a shortage of contractors that are willing to do work. And this problem, every county that has been allocated these grants, and every county has different amounts, they're all struggling with finding locations, finding people to do the work. So it's not an out-of-line question.
Overall, of all the buildings that we looked at, I do favor the Hereford for many reasons. But how much is it going to cost us out of our budget per year when we have a struggling time to meet other needs? And I haven't come to a conclusion on that.
Well,
Especially when we've got other things right here.
in order for you to come conclusion on it, one of the things that we would have to do is we anticipate the M110 grant funding to continue. How much it's going to be, we don't know exactly. But all the people at the state that we talked to about this are saying we expect it to continue. Because while the $100 million that the legislature allocated for mental health or substance use disorder treatment facilities like this throughout the state, they understand that you can't just start it and expect it to continue without further support. I don't know how much it's going to be, but I would expect we would see continuing interest. And as a country, we're all suffering from increased behavioral health issues. We have a hard time finding people to work in behavioral health. Not unique to us, but we have to get after it.
We need to recognize the burn grant is restricted funds. We can't use it for our
Right.
operating expenses.
No, we would eat that up real quick on renovation. But are we going to have to supplement from our other funds to help on the renovation?
So are you asking for a vote tonight on
Yes.
board of this?
You have to understand, if we have to spend the money by the end of this year, we have to get after it. I mean, we're already in April. We complained even when I made the presentation in March, how are we going to get this done how are we going to spend all this money? I can't even necessarily find contractors if we don't get approval. Fortunately, they 100% agree. the entire committee. And the comment after the meeting was they were absolutely surprised that they had 100% approval. So they believe that this is not this specific building, but our focus is the right approach. The question is it the right building? But if we don't do something now, we won't meet the deadlines.
The deadline, what, June 30?
December 31st, 2000, right now it's 2023. Will they extend that? Good chance they will. How much more? I don't know.
So December 31, 2023 is when we need to expend the money?
That's in the next 9 months. And if we spend another 2-3 months looking into and determining if this is going to work, then make a decision, we're almost into the fall to get the roof fixed, let alone the work done. That's our problem, that's our dilemma. If you think there's a better building, I'm anxious to hear.
Well, I think, it makes sense to look at this, we're taking outside money that we don't use will go away, take a building that is rotting in the middle of our town, that needs a new roof. I agree with Ken to some extent, though, is to have some type of estimate of what, because what we're talking about is fixing the roof and using the bottom floor. But I do feel we should have at least a kind of a range of what fixing the roof is going to entail, at least then.
Well, if it's fixing the roof, that's going to be major. Refurbishing the downstairs part, you're going to have to go through the county and get a building permit. You're going to have somebody do a cost of it. And that type of work is not cheap either.
Right.
That could be more so than the roofing.
Right, but I think eventually if the funding keeps coming, there'll be other funding coming from outside sources to help us to accomplish those in later dates. But what we're talking about now is stabilizing the building, stopping the leak. Is what we're trying to do on step one. And I think we should have at least an estimate of, from this to this is about what it's going to cost.
So what happens if you could eat up all your funds and you don't complete the project?
So complete the project, we are already delivering service. So it's not that we can't deliver. We are doing that. There are many more people that are suffering from substance use disorder that could use this services.
Right, what I'm saying is if you eat up your 850,000 and you're stuck with whatever to finish, what happens then?
So
Do you have a mandatory like start date, you have to supply this in this building?
no, we're already delivering the service.
Okay.
They're not saying it is
So what
building
I'm thinking
specific.
is you could do what you're saying, if it comes and you have to stop the project, then you're not adding extra money out of your pocket to finish it. You have to go to them and say, hey, hopefully this grant's going to continue.
Yeah.
And
We
then
need more support.
as the grant continues, then you work on the electrical and the plumbing and the other issues as they come along.
Yeah.
And can't some of our people here actually work on that, maintenance or
Yes.
anything like that?
So one of the things that's important to understand is some of the electrical as an example. We have 2 electricians that are working with us that can only work on district-owned property. They can't work on something that we rent, but they can work on district-owned property. There are ways that we can be as efficient as we can. There are some spaces on the ground floor that, even with the roof in its dilapidated state, there have been tenants in the building up until just recently, all the time. So it's not like the building is completely unusable. It doesn't have air conditioning, so in the summer, on hot days, it does get a little warmer. But the tenants have still been in there.
But there's still some cost. If we moved a lot of folks in, we'd have to do plumbing also, more restrooms. And once you open that wall up and do something, you get into a can of worms with the building department and the state codes. We haven't researched that part. What all, I'm not being, say, hire somebody that, a contractor to inspect it, that come here from Portland in 6 months. But we can get some estimates of some of the structural needs and some off-the-wall costs. Make sure we have an idea, so we're not blindsided by exorbitant. It's not just the cost of doing the work, it's the cost of going through the bureaucracy to get it done. The county, the building fish, if you start opening up this one section, you might as well just be expecting to do the whole section, not going to piecemeal it. So we need a plan and some estimate. Maybe your staff crew, like you said, like the electricians, they can be essential people that can contribute to what needs to be done, or anybody else.
My experience in construction is the price today is the price today, not the price tomorrow, not the price 6 months ago. It's the
Right.
price today.
Yep.
And so that we could spend a great deal of time trying to estimate what costs are today or could be, or what we might have for what it would take, and we would fritter away at a time. I don't think we have that luxury.
What we do have is approximately $600,000 in hand to do the roof and the first floor.
And the first floor.
But I guess only thing I would like to make sure is that, at least, isn't there a contractor that's worked for us on roofs here, or that we could get a ballpark range of, yeah, the roof's gonna cost you about 400,000, or if he comes back and says it's gonna be 900,000, we got a problem.
Right. The challenge that we have is, as the Brownsfield report says, in order to replace the roof, you need to take the old roof off and then structurally attach it to the steel in the building and then set that on. So it has to be engineered first. In order to do that, it'll take us months to get that. Now, if that's what you want to do, if you need to have that before we pull the trigger, then I'm going to suggest we look at something else, because we won't have the time to deal with the grant.
Charlie, can I ask a quick question on it? Because I know I'm just listening to some of this. As old as that building is, how much asbestos is in the basement or ground floor, or the first floor?
So according to the Brownsfield study that was done, most of it's encapsulated. In the basement, there is some exposed, but it wouldn't have to be addressed at this time.
Okay. Just curious.
Yep. No, it's a good question.
Yeah, that's on that.
And have you read the Brownsfield report here?
Breezed through it, yeah. It didn't give dollars or anything, but it made statements like restoration and reuse be a challenge due to the schools with a structural system.
We stipulate to that.
Yeah.
We know it's a challenge.
And
But that doesn't change whatever location you have. The challenge is going to be there.
And significant remodeling and extensive structure. And we don't, if we had somebody just to give a ballpark estimate, we don't need a decimal point number. But my only concern is we can use that 850, but we have 600 left. That may encompass the roof, but is it going to, where are we going to cover cost of renovation, remodeling, electrical rewiring, and all the other stuff? We may have a grant next year, but I don't want it coming out of our pocket here that we're struggling. We can't even remodel the kitchen.
Let's talk about another building then. Because if it's going to be, if your concern is so great, then we need to talk about a different building. Because we don't have the time to try to find every estimate and every Because frankly, what happens in the estimates is they will be so, they're so uncertain.
Didn't mention detailed estimates.
Excuse me, we've got, yes.
Can I ask a question? And I don't know anything about the building stuff, but Charlie, is the intent to put public health and behavioral health together, or no? Just
No.
behavioral health
No,
staff
Kim.
and all that? So,
Public health is located differently.
okay, so was the intent to put people in the lower floor of the building right away? Or, my question is, because if it's gonna take months for the roof to be put on, hypothetically, can you have people in the building when the roof is being replaced?
The answer is you can, yes.
Okay,
There have been tenants in the building for the last 5 years.
but they've had a roof over,
The roof is still there.
okay.
You do this in the summertime.
Right, but you were talking about needing to take off the whole roof and, you know, make the structure attach and all that.
When they take off roofs on buildings, they don't destroy the building, they just take the top part off.
They take the asphalt layer off and then replace it. But if you have to get down into the decking or the trusses or joists, they'll get into more detail work.
What's the square footage of the building?
54,000 square feet, I think. That's all 3 floors.
So I was just thinking about the roof, and so I quick got an estimate from my husband who is in this business. He said 37,000 square feet on one of his clinics is $350,000 fully adhered to EPDM. For 4 stories, multiple level building this year is $850,000.
What was that amount?
3 stories.
Yeah, so this would be a 4-story building for $850,000 to replace the roof, and that's in Minneapolis. So I would imagine it would be a little harder to get the, what we need to do that here. So just rough estimate, just based on square footage.
Yeah, recent contractor gave me an estimate within 1 hour. I just gave him the square footage, I paced off this, paced off that, gave it to him. Some of the structures on top he had to work on. And he put it into the computer and came out with $600,000. Very thousand. It didn't take a month to do that. It took her 1 hour. It's a ballpark number, but it gives us something to work with. I'm not opposed to not buying the Hereford. I think there's many aspects. I just don't want to get infested and then have to use other funds that we have struggling with to bring it up to speed on the assumption we have future grants. If we can just give me a path to follow. I just want
You want one number, as I hear, is that right, Ken, for the roof?
well, I already got a number for the roof.
We do.
What is
I
it?
just told you, 600,000 by one contractor locally.
Okay,
But what did you have?
okay.
That's 430 to 600 someplace. It depends on what you get into after you take a roof off.
Yeah.
I mean, that would take care of the roof with the money we have. Do we have money for the refurbishing downstairs at the same time? No, we don't. We had to wait for another grant to come in. The footpath just hasn't been laid out grossly, other than just buying it. That's my concern, but I'm just going up fight.
Okay. Discussion?
Table this till we second one.
We can call a special meeting. We don't have to wait for a month or so. Just get a couple, look at guys, give a rough estimate, ballpark estimate, because what the estimate is today is different than it will be next week. I understand that. But it gives you.
Or what the actual cost might be.
Yeah.
So we're still,
And how we're gonna cover that. I don't want to invest and then be stuck with expenses that would eat away with our daily business.
well, I'm not in favor of not just using restricted funds. I think that's pretty clear for us. Just using restricted funds.
Yeah.
Not what Ken is saying, getting into something else to take away. Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, make it happen, assure us that you got our steps covered. And having the steps covered, we have to know what those steps are, what they include.
Okay.
And come back in a special meeting in 2 weeks.
We'll see if we can get real estimates, not coattail or napkin estimates.
Good. Good. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to prolong the decision. A couple of weeks, to get something.
Can you have maintenance go in and look at the bottom floor?
Have they? Yeah.
The real question is the roof. So looking at the ground floor.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is because then, if we have enough money to put the roof on, then if we want to, we can piecemeal some stuff at the bottom, if the maintenance is capable of doing it. If they aren't, then, it's that out the door, but,
Maintenance is capable of doing it,
okay,
but it's a question of time.
yeah, yeah,
The roof would have to be replaced pretty darn quick.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
we only have 90 days of real roofing weather here.
So could we get an engineer from like OIT or someplace like that?
I can certainly try.
So that they can figure out how to hook everything into the steel in the building, the supports.
I'll engage a firm to give us a real estimate. And it won't happen. I will estimate that 2 months will be the soonest we will hear.
Two months, that'd be May, June, going into July.
Then we'll
I would
get the
suggest
estimate.
if we really
Then
want
we
to.
need a contractor. It'll be next year before anything happens.
Yeah.
I'd suggest I'll start looking and give a different proposal for a different building. We don't have the time.
Well,
Okay,
like I
that's
said,
fine.
I'm one individual. There may be 4 others that may say, go for it. Are you guys ready to go for it? I would reserve my vote. I'm not going to say yes until I see some steps. But I'll leave it up to 4 fellows.
When you look at it, there's the community service aspect, if it's not us, who's gonna fix the building, and if not now, when is it gonna be fixed? If we leave it, sooner or later, the place will just fall down.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anybody around who would be willing to pick up on that building. Pretty soon it'll be a crater in the
It will.
if it burns, that whole block will go.
Yeah. I had a person, like I mentioned, I was in there back in '07, and the buckets catching water. He mentioned to me, as I encountered him at Ace, he said he just emptied 200 gallons of water that morning from the Harrisburg building. That's a substantial
We
amount of
know
water.
it leaks. We know it's got the problems. It's the question is whether we go forward with the purchase and then
Yeah.
work on getting the roof and the
Yeah.
first floor. And so the purchase is the first thing, then fixing the roof, and then the floors,
Yep.
or the first floor is the second thing. And what you're looking for is certainty on fixing the roof. And we can't give you any certainty right now.
I had certainty on roofs. I mean, I'm just, if that eats up what money we have, we had to put in and grant what it's gonna take to refurbish the electrical and remodeling the first floor. We don't have any money. If the roof repair eats up what money we have, how are we gonna finance refurbishing the first floor? Where's that money gonna come from?
Well, you just won't if it has to come from regular operating.
As long as it doesn't come, that's my concern, where's it gonna come from? Or not?
Yeah, I don't want it to be either case. I think we should table this for work session.
Okay. Well, let's table this and do a little bit more board discussion and a little bit more digging in and take a look at what the costs are going to be.
Okay.
But how quick can we do that?
Within 2 weeks.
Within 2 weeks.
Like I said, I'm not opposed, I just want to make sure we got a financial track of where we're gonna cover, because the roof is gonna eat that money up. And we're not gonna have anything refurbished down below, especially if we get into,
Okay, I just, would move we table the item until we have a chance to review and move forward.
And give Charlie the marching orders to try to find something as quick as can. Okay. Any other discussion? Thank you, Charlie. Next thing, Ed, you're up.
All right, trying to make this as quick as possible. We've been talking about money in account from all maintenance. You're on Lakeview Gardens. So gross revenue was 104 in long-term care, 57 in the out, with a revenue increase of 15.6 in February. So that's that. Instead of seeing a revenue deduction, there's actually like a boost. Where you saw a bigger deduction previously, it's just the way it cycles. It did.
Contract labor really went up.
Yeah, we'll, and maybe Mickey can speak to that a little more, but we're definitely finding permanent solutions for that. So that was our goal, that will go down.
And we're opening up the second building, aren't we, for long-term care?
Third.
Yes. And we're so we have a pretty efficient model going forward, I think. But it's 1 million for the year in a loss, which is significantly less than it was last year at this time. Next one, this is a little painful presentation. The winter we had to true up some things and make right some wage cost stuff. That's where you see the little dip, but they're still on track for the year for Lake Health Medical Supply. And
Or was it PTO?
One-time adjustment, Ed?
yes, one time, yeah.
PTO? No?
That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Dr. Graham, you're up.
I have nothing to report. We had to cancel our medical staff meeting last month. So,
Isn't that twice in a row?
nothing to report? Hey, we're just, we're not buying buildings. I just pay a rent check, so.
but you did have a checkbook.
And not that kind.
Well, in that case, good.
Yeah, we're good.
Nothing to report, I guess is good. Nursing report, Tori, you're up.
Thanks. I would be happy to answer any questions you have for me. We're busy working on a lot of staff education, getting ready to start another term of our KCC nursing and CNA programs. Working on getting things ready for impending state survey, which will happen at some point, but we don't know when. But lots to get ready for that. That's us. We're keeping busy.
Questions? Others? Quick and to the point. So, department manager reports. We'll start. Nikki, would you like to?
Sure. So with, because we do the CNA classes, that has allowed me to have enough CNAs to be able to staff the second house. So there's the 2 long-term care houses and the 1 assisted living. One of the long-term care houses was the one that was closed. And so we reopened the long-term care with our first 2 patients on Tuesday, and they are being billed using their Medicare services. What my specialty is part of when long-term care can bill Medicare, we get paid significantly more than other insurances or Medicaid. So because of the way Medicare changed their payment and billing for long-term care, it's no longer based on therapy minutes provided, which is how it used to be. It's now based on the whole services. Like I said to somebody in the government finally got it right, because it's not just therapies that help rehab these patients to go home. So they base their payment based on, other diagnoses that are difficult to maintain. What is their actual need for the skill to have nurses take care of them every day. It takes into consideration, their dementia level, what their therapy needs are, and so with those patients, I'm expecting that we are going to get paid anywhere from, in the first 3 days that we bill Medicare is 3 times the amount they would pay on a normal daily basis. Because the first 3 days of a Medicare stay is the most work, because you're assessing the patient, deciding what you need, writing the care plan, putting everything together. So for the first 3 days, you get 3 times the amount of the original daily cost. After that, then they pay the original daily cost for the 20 days, and I'm estimating, based on my past experience with this billing, it's called PDPM, but based on that billing, my past experiences, we range from anywhere from $700 to $1,200 a day. So, versus per patient. So if we can, we have another skilled person coming on Friday. So that makes 3 people that we're billing Medicare for. And then they, gradually the longer they stay, you lose after 20 days, it goes down 2%. And then after another 20 days, it goes down another 2%. Because, of course, Medicare wants us to rehab them as fast as we can and have that incentive to not lose that 2%. So versus Medicaid, I think right now per day in Medicaid, it's like right around $377 a day per patient. So that's
a big difference.
That's a huge difference. So I'm quite excited to be able to take these skilled people. My problem is that when I'd like to address the contract labor, is that I have 1 CNA traveler, and I still need her like through the summer to cover vacations and things like that, because but I anticipate that once the next class is finished.
When does the next class get out?
It starts in April, so it goes 8 weeks, I believe. So
May, June? July.
End of the month, yeah, we'll start.
Yep.
Okay.
So I anticipate I will be able to not have her anymore. My major problem is nurses. HR hasn't been able to find me nurses. So my contract labor is mostly, I have 3 contract labor nurses,
RNs.
RNs, they have to be RNs per regulatory, regulatory. I've tried to get LPNs, we have it posted on our traveling site for LPNs, because they can work the night shifts per regulation. But they can't, I can't count them for nursing hours during the day. So that requires that I have an RN during the day. Right now, I only have 3 travelers. And in order to effectively have a schedule, I need at least 4 because they do 2 days, would do 3 on, 3 off, and alternate, and same with nights. So I'm paying the contract nurses overtime, which is actually, don't look at me like that, Don. So it's actually, so their overtime is only $10 more an hour contractually. So instead of time and a half of what we pay ours. So paying them overtime is cheaper than having another traveler come. So I've looked at that, but at the same time, I don't want the 3 travelers I have to burn out. And I'm losing 1 on May 3rd. So that leaves me 2 nurses. And so that's where the issue lies.
So we've got 3 patients now in long-term care in the new building, or the new home. Right?
Tomorrow will be the 3rd one, yep.
Tomorrow will be the 3rd one. Do we have more, coming in later?
Yeah, we have a lady that when we closed the building, we had to transfer her to the assisted living. Because she was one of the borderline patients that could qualify for assisted living versus long-term. She now needs to come back to us.
Or ADLs are up, so it's...
Yep. And so I wish Oregon was a case mix state,
But it's not.
but it's not. So, I mean, unfortunately. Maybe hopefully one day, I don't know. But, so that's 4, and then we are, of course, because long-term bed availability is short throughout the state, word is getting around through the DHS caseworkers that we have open beds. And we do have people from our community living outside of our community wanting to come back. So, like, for example, we have a resident, there's a resident in Portland, and we're trying to work with his long-term care insurance so that they'll pay for his stay at our facility.
Okay.
So
when we fill this building, then we'll need more RNs.
no. I need, in order to make the nurses work, I need 4 nurses.
Okay.
3, 2 for days, 2 for nights.
Whether we have
period.
3 or 6 or 12, you
Yep.
still need 4. Okay.
Yep, in order to, in order to provide services at the high level of skill to be able to bill Medicare, I really believe you need an RN.
Okay. I'll go to school.
I mean, for a very educated, and experienced LPN, that would also be an option, but there's a shortage. We don't have, we can't we kind of get what we get.
Keep
So,
after it. You're doing a good job, keep after it.
yeah, and I want to say thank you for approving the beds because of some of our beds, mattresses are dated in the 90s. So, as you can imagine, the residents are very uncomfortable in some of their mattresses. So I very much appreciate that, thank you.
We have to be very attentive to that. Comfort.
And the beds I'm getting the mattresses are automatically built air mattresses. So it's better for skin protection and we don't have to buy separate machines to put at the end of the bed for skin protection if they need it. Which those machines cost about $6,000 a piece. So the new beds will have it already built in. So,
Thank you, Nikki.
yeah, you're welcome.
Updated.
I was hoping I had good news for you guys, so.
It is good.
It's open, to do.
Yes.
And the fact that we have Medicare and Medicaid people in long-term care, maybe we can get away from having to pay the $150,000 tax.
Mhm.
You know, as we get closer to what, 80%?
86.
86.
86% for what, Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicaid.
Well, we have, all of our residents are Medicare or Medicaid right now.
Okay.
It saves us 100%.
Yeah,
Yep.
excellent. Okay. Are you ready?
I am ready. Are you
Okay.
ready for more numbers?
Oh,
I'll keep it nice and short though. So as you know, we've been tracking since January the number of patients that we have to place for care. And we started a number of patients needing placed. All insurances went from 590 in January, we're at 547 in April. Eligible from Alturas are 195. This is all April numbers now. Total of 742, so we still have 742 patients that need providers, primary care patients. The variables are continued calls, placements, chart cleanup. We found through the EOCCO, if a patient goes to the emergency room and say they're a patient, or they see Dr. Graham in the ER, EOCCO automatically places them on his patient panel. So we have a mixture of patients that belong to us and some, I think we found 119 that belong to him. So Karen has been working with Dayla on that, trying to figure that out. Total patient panels. So Tiffany has none, of course, she covers every patient because she has the potential to see them all. Erin Stewart is at 857, up 111. Roseanne Fitzgerald is 747 patients, up 89 patients this month. Dr. Hussey has 708, up 41. Dr. Gallagher has 611, up 16. And Dr. Chen has 440, up 41 patients. So our total patient caseload is 3,363 patients. And that's an increase of 298 over March. So we're making headway.
Where are all these new patients coming from?
Well, they call, they want in, I mean, yeah, who knows? Who knows? All we know is the numbers that we're running, you know. I know with this comes the potential for burnout, so as those numbers increase, it's taking a toll on the staff. Just throwing it out there, but they're working their hardest.
More providers, so we'll see.
Absolutely, so there's good news with that. We have had several interviews, phone interviews. We're trying to work on getting the primary care folks to come in and see us in person. We did have one orthopedic doctor come in and meet with the doctors and tour the facility, and that is promising right now as well. So Charlie may want to tell more about that. That's all I got.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comments? Okay. Department manager reports, I see a few department managers. Does anybody Want to stand up, Sean, or Tyson, or Heidi? Nope, okay.
Yeah. I just want to say we did get our new range and oven installed last night. The maintenance guys got done about 7:30 last night, and we started using it today, and it's fabulous.
Wonderful, good.
Great.
So now you're cooking. That's all right. Okay, with that, next item on the agenda is the CEO report. Charlie, you're up.
A couple things have been happening. You'll all notice, with the exception of 2 people, we don't have any masks. The state, while it was allowed not to have masks elsewhere, we were waiting on the OSHA requirements. They agreed as of January 3rd, or April 3rd, to allow no mask. And we just got clarification that in long-term care, they don't have to wear a mask unless Judy declares there's an outbreak in the community, or there's an outbreak. So Judy, please keep those away. And, or there's an individual outbreak within the one of the houses. So lots of people are very pleased with that. We talked about having a mask burning party, but held off with that. As part of this now determination that we don't have the COVID crisis, during crisis we got 24 additional beds that were designated in the, what we call the West Wing, was the old long-term care. We bought relatively inexpensive beds, not the kind that we're talking about, and had it set up in case we got a surge. We will lose our license for those 24 beds. So, not that anybody cared, but we were licensed for 48 beds just recently. So that goes away. We provide for our staff a form of retirement benefit, and we work that through our 403B program and through the matching program that the hospital, and not matching, the portion of the hospital, portion of the payment that the hospital makes for employees. We switched to a different company a couple of years ago, Edward Jones, and I thought you might be interested to know the level of money that people put aside on their own 403B savings program, and then what the district does for the employees. For the 406 employees, we currently have $7,965,931 in their account. And those that are saving in their 403B program is $5,556,000, for a total of $13,522,000 in employees' retirement benefits. That's pretty significant. One of the things that I have encouraged, and we keep trying very hard with our HR department, to get all new employees to sign up for some kind of savings. $5 in a 403B program may not seem like much, but when you get white-haired or no-haired and you start thinking about retirement, there are benefits to that. So all of you that are thinking about putting money in your savings account, great, do it. But $13 million is a lot of money. So that's pretty exciting. And we've charged Edward Jones with trying to get everyone to do it. As Mickey talks about ways to try to deal with our long-term care costs, Representative Owens, Mark Owens, and Senator Lynn Finley are helping me, and we're working together to get a bill to have our cost-based reimbursement for long-term care. It's not done, but they think that we have some prospect for it this year. So that would affect not only our hospital, but the hospital in John Day and the hospital in Reedsport. So that would be a huge benefit for us. So excited about that. We had a recent change in our EOCCO contract. It is designed to meet the CCO 2.0 rules and regulations. So greater money is put into portions where it's paying to the primary care services, and greater funds are put in at risk. So as both Dr. Graham and as Lisa talked about, all the patients that are from the CCO, it gets bigger and bigger at-risk dollars for them to manage in our clinic, to manage the patient care. So we try very hard to do a good job. So, as you recall, last year, our additional monies that we received from the CCO was $1.1 million. So it's not small. But we did receive a contract offer from Anthem Blue Cross for our medical supply company. We reviewed that today. Rates aren't perfect, but they're not bad, so we're working on seeing if we get better. That will have a significant impact on our medical supply company. We talked about trying to get that. We've been working on it. So Blue Cross in Oregon is Regency. In California, it's Anthem Blue Cross. And we have lots of patients that come from California that come to our sleep plan that also use our medical supply for oxygen and other support services. Questions, John? Did you have a okay, good. Other than that, we're kind of staying busy. What to do? Okay. Any questions? Okay.
We'll have an executive session. We'll adjourn to executive session under ORS 192-660, bracket 2, bracket A personnel, bracket C medical staff, bracket B real estate,